Aloha, my name is Mike DeMotta. I was born and raised in Honolulu on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. I am a cultural practitioner. I was raised in the Hawaiian culture, and my background is in Hawaiian oli, hula, native Hawaiian plants, and ni'ihau shell lei making. I work as the curator for living collections at the National Tropical Botanical Garden. And one of my primary functions here is to curate the native plant collection and to assist in conservation and restoration projects at our garden on the North Shore, Limuhuli Garden, as well as other restoration projects on the island of Kauai. My upbringing in the Hawaiian culture and my work in conservation puts me at the perfect intersection for biocultural conservation, always thinking about the way the Hawaiian indigenous wisdom would be employed in cultural restoration and native plant conservation here in Hawaii. I always find it very important that we learn about the areas that we work in, including traditional place names. The Hawaiian names take us back to a history that goes 1,000 years back, and those names have been uttered by Hawaiians for all that time, links us to our ancestors and provides for some meaning to the areas that we are working in. So it's a part of the living culture, and it's a part of our culture that our youth need to learn more about today. There's always a story as to why an area has its name, and so that's also a very important part of biocultural conservation. My cultural background provides a perfect intersection with conservation, and so I always bring a biocultural conservation approach to the projects that we do, trying to reflect on the traditional wisdom of our ancestors and how they would reflect on their stewardship of the land. The Hawaiians were a very sustainable farmers. They always tried to be sure that ecosystem function and ecosystem restoration was always an important part of their farming practices. My expertise lies in the propagation of native Hawaiian plants, particularly rare and endangered species. And so we try to accomplish habitat restoration in wherever areas that we're working in, including from the ground up. So ferns, mosses, epiphytes that live on trees and shrubs, right up to the canopy species, to create a habitat of common species so that we can introduce rare and endangered plants within that habitat. And ecosystem function was always an important aspect in the ancient Hawaiian culture. And so today we are trying to accomplish that, to create habitat for plants and insects and birds that we might not realize that are in the system, but depend on the plants that we are restoring to those systems. What I will be showing and talking about in our presentations are my participation in cultural and conservation projects here on Kauai. I will especially focus on native plant propagation and how it relates to the projects that we have. I'm always considering the wisdom of our traditional ancestors and the way they would view different sites on the island. One of the things that I'd like to focus on when I'm at some of the sites are to look for Hawaiian cultural sites, ahu or altars, places where offerings were made, fishing shrines, living sites, and it's a very important thing for me to learn the Hawaiian place names, because these days more people tend to use modern names for the locations, and the Hawaiian place names were very important because it tied the ancient culture with that place and the stories of the culture to that place, so that when we approach any project, it's with a biocultural conservation approach, always drawing on the wisdom of our ancestors and their traditional stewardship of the land.